This is the multi-voice text-to-speech podfic reading of Riddikulus by Imparfait, composed by Burning Aurora, Caliana, and Flowerhawk. March 1977. Chapter 1, Remus. Remus Lupin turns 17 in a snowstorm. He's freezing cold, it's the middle of the fucking night, and his idiot of a boyfriend is somewhere in the whiteout in front of him. He can't hear him laughing anymore, which makes it possibly worse.
Serious?
Remus shouts. He's not dying of hypothermia at the lakeside on his birthday. It's not going to happen. Something heavy and solid barrels into him, and he falls backward into the snow. Padfoot licks his cheek. Remus makes a face and goes to scrub at the slobber with his hand, but then suddenly there's that static charge in the air, and Sirius is on top of him, grinning.
Happy birthday,
he says, and he stuffs a handful of snow down Remus's robes. They tromp back into the castle, sopping wet and after hours. Sirius has the invisibility cloak. Remus has his prefect badge. They're invincible as they race up and up the stairs to the prefect's bathroom. Remus wants a bath after running around outside until 1 in the bloody morning. It's his birthday, today of all days. Sod the rules. Sirius sheds the invisibility cloak and most of his wet clothing as soon as the door closes behind them.
anything you could have had in the world for your birthday, and you say a soak.
Sirius says as he fiddles with the taps in his shorts. Remus undresses more slowly, casting drying charms as he goes.
I said a soak with you, which isn't the same, you know.
Sirius grins at him over his shoulder.
A sexy soak, I see, very different.
You'll notice I didn't say at any point on any of the number of times you've asked me what I wanted to do for my birthday. Let's go running across the grounds in a blizzard.
That was before midnight.
Sirius objects.
It was going to be a romantic walk on the grounds. I can't control the weather.
He looks away to adjust the faucets. Blue, sparkling bubbles start pouring out. The air smells almost citrusy, like the fancy washing potion Sirius uses, the one with the gold flecks in the bottle that Remus rolls his eyes at every time he reaches for his bar of soap. Remus tuts as he slides into the tub. The water isn't all the way full yet, and Sirius is still fiddling with the faucets, but it goes up to his armpits, and the water is just this side of too hot.
I thought you were the greatest wizard of all time, but you can't even control the weather.
Remus leans his head back against the edge of the tub and looks up at Sirius's grinning face. He looks lovely in the dim candlelight. He's got his hair tied up, but a few rebellious curls hang loose around his face. His cheeks are red from the cold maybe, or from Remus. Remus still has a hard time believing he can summon a blush to Sirius Black's face just by looking at him. He reaches up and tugs on Sirius's hand.
Come in,
he says.
I don't want you to watch me have a bath.
I would,
Sirius says as he sheds his pants and climbs in next to Remus. He rests his head against Remus's shoulder.
I used to sneak peeks at you in the shower.
You did not.
I did so.
He turns his head and presses a kiss against Remus's shoulder.
Used to have the best dreams about you too.
Remus laughs.
You don't anymore.
Well, they're not dreams anymore, are they?
Sirius looks up at Remus with his sparkling eyes and that flush across his cheeks that Remus could write sonnets about.
It's better, now that it's real.
Remus kisses him. He's got to. Sometimes the way Sirius loves him overwhelms Remus, and he can't summon the words to say anything back. And sometimes the things he thinks are too mean and depreciating to himself to say aloud. How could he say, I never thought you'd love me to this man and have him understand? But he didn't think he ever would. Not when he started noticing that he felt very differently about Sirius than he did about the others. Remus spent too many nights lying awake with his hands still in his pajama bottoms, sweat cooling on his skin, thinking he'd never. He would, though, as it turns out. He would, and he will, and he wants to forever. Sirius doesn't have small feelings. He doesn't do things in half measures. He fell in love with Remus and burned down his whole life to keep him. Remus doesn't have words for how that makes him feel. There aren't any. He's checked. He does his best to tell him other ways. He thinks Sirius knows. They separate for long enough for Sirius to slide onto his lap, and then they're kissing again, pressed together chest to chest, his legs trapped between Sirius's thighs. Remus feels like he's dreaming. Everything feels ethereal and warm. The lemony smell in the air, the bubbles from the bath sparkling and popping around them, Sirius above him. He thinks, yes, this is all I wanted as Sirius wiggles closer. They slot together like two pieces of a puzzle. Remus gasps when Sirius shifts and their cocks rub together. Sirius pulls away, laughing sweetly.
You're so easy, Mooney.
He says.
I'm not.
Remus leans forward again to kiss him, but Sirius dodges him, still laughing, and Remus lands a kiss on his jaw instead.
I've just got a soft spot for you.
I wouldn't call it soft.
Sirius says as he lifts his hips again and presses them together. Remus lets his head fall onto Sirius's shoulder as Sirius lets his hands wander across Remus's chest and down over his belly, taking his time touching him. He traces his scars without looking because he's mapped every inch of Remus. He knows his body by heart. Remus sometimes feels ashamed of his scars, even with Sirius, but it never lasts long under Sirius's worshipping hands. They've never done this underwater before, and Remus isn't sure why not. Everything feels different, muted in some ways and amplified in others. He nearly sobs when Sirius finally strokes his thumb over the head of his cock. Sirius shushes him.
I've got you.
He promises against Remus's hair. He keeps touching, maddeningly light and slippery from the bathwater, down his cock to the root. There's no friction, nothing for Remus to grind up against, so he's left to come apart under Sirius's careful hands.
Padfoot.
He begs, he's shaking. Sirius mouths at Remus's neck. His fingers are still ghosting against his skin, tracing the scars on the inside of his thighs, on his groin. Remus's eyelids flutter closed when Sirius palms his sack. He's still trembling against Sirius. Sirius noses at the bruise he sucked onto Remus's neck. He shifts his weight, brings them flush together, and wraps his hand around both of their cocks, trapping them together. He arches up into Sirius, voice breaking around a gasped "Fuck, Sirius." The slipslide of Sirius moving against him and stroking them together makes his hips twitch. Sirius buries his face in the crook of Remus's neck. He chokes out Mooney, so pleasure thick that it makes Remus's cock twitch. He clutches against Sirius's back, using him to get leverage to thrust up and fuck into Sirius's hand. Sirius whimpers and his hand tightens, and Remus knows that Sirius is about to come from the tremble in his biceps and the way his whole body tenses. His hand falters. He takes a gasping breath against Remus's neck and lets go of them, twisting to fist Remus's cock again and twisting his wrist in that exact way that makes Remus's toes curl. He's still shaking from his orgasm. Remus knows he's so far gone, knows he wants to let himself drift in the bliss, but Sirius won't stop until Remus comes too.
Remus, please.
Sirius says against his ear, hoarse and desperate. He twists his wrist again. It's all Remus needs. The air punches out his lungs. He scrabbles his finger pads against Sirius's back, trembling as he comes. Sirius slumps against him. He's boneless and loose. Remus can't see his face, but he knows he looks dreamy and well fucked. They rest against each other in the still hot bath for a little while, breathing hard and gathering themselves. It takes Sirius longer. It always does.
I told you a soak was a good idea.
Remus says. Sirius laughs and pulls himself up out of the crook of Remus's neck. His face is still flushed. His eyes are still sparkling in the candlelight. He lifts himself gracefully off of Remus's thighs and collapses next to him. They stay in the water for a long time, until the bubbles dissipate and the warming charm wears off. Neither of them want to move, because moving means leaving this moment behind. Remus will never have enough of these moments. He'll hoard all of them until he dies, and he'll still not be satisfied. Sirius smacks him with a towel while they're getting dressed. They almost forget the invisibility cloak by the door, which would be the death of them both. Remus is exhausted by the time they're put back together again, but he doesn't think he's ever felt so content in his life. Sirius slips an arm around him as they leave the bathroom. He leans his head on Remus's shoulder.
Good birthday.
He asks. Remus smiles at him.
The best.
In the morning, they oversleep. They're laughing as they race down the stairs. Transfiguration started 5 minutes ago. Sirius doesn't even have his tie on. McGonagall is going to kill them both, then resurrect them to serve detention. It's all right, though, because Remus has the transfigured crown on his head and his whole future stretching out in front of him. Chapter 2, James. The night before James Potter's 17th birthday, two things happen. The first thing is they managed to name the extracurricular cartography project. James thinks but he means Remus, who is in the middle of a very thick novel about wizard pirates on the high seas. Wormtail and Padfoot hate his code name. Mooney claims to not have an opinion, which is diplomatic of him, but James knows he also thinks it's terrible. Admittedly, and it's hard for him to admit, it is. The problem is, every other name they've managed to think up in the last year of mapping the school has been equally terrible. Or in the case of,
The reason I will have wrist pain for the next 50 years is not the lycanthropy. It's this fucking thing.
even worse. Mooney's sprawled on his bed on his stomach, his book propped up against a pillow. Padfoot's laying mostly on top of him, half asleep with his head resting between Mooney's shoulder blades. James loves their love, especially in moments like this. He pokes fun, but there'll never be a better fit, not in the whole of the universe. He's thinking about that while he lounges next to Peter, who has the extracurricular cartography project spread out next to him.
Can't we just call it the map of Hogwarts and be done with it?
Peter asks.
Lax whimsy?
Remus says. He turns the page in his book and then looks up at them, considering.
Marauder's map.
Sirius stirs.
That one's nice.
He says, voice muffled against Remus's back.
Are you cribbing Blackbeard, Mooney?
James asks.
I am,
He answers.
but it's the right name.
James grins at Peter and Peter grins back because it is. The second thing that happens, the more important thing, is that Lily Evans breaks up with Kingsley Shacklebolt. Lily and Sirius are already at breakfast when James arrives. It's his turn in a transfigured crown. He wears it at a jaunty angle, and the fake gemstones glitter in the candlelight. The conversation they're having ceases when James arrives and tosses himself down onto the bench.
Prongs.
Sirius says. Whatever they were speaking about must have been a gut-buster, because Sirius is breathless with laughter, and Lily's red-faced with a guilty air about her.
It is.
James tells them, going for solemn and frankly landing it.
My birthday.
We both have calendars.
Lily says.
I'm shocked you've made it to 9:30 without blowing a single thing up as a gift to yourself.
I did think about doing something with fireworks to mark the occasion, but I think McGonagall will skin me alive if I try it.
He looks at Sirius.
We've gone soft, Padfoot.
This is step one.
He replies.
Get her to trust us. Get her to like us even.
And then we lay waste to her kingdom.
Lily rolls her eyes.
James,
She scolds almost fondly, and James's entire world tilts. He's very glad he's already sitting down, because he might have done an honest-to-Merlin swoon if he weren't. He takes a gulp of pumpkin juice for strength.
No.
Sirius continues as though Lily Evans calling James Potter by his given name isn't world-changing.
Then I get a letter of recommendation from my head of house, which, given our disciplinary record, might be the greatest prank of them all.
James tuts.
I knew Mooney would rub off on you eventually, Padfoot, but I didn't think it would be quite so thorough. You've gone all tea-drinking and bookish.
Sirius leers at him.
Mooney is very thorough with his rubbing off, I assure you.
Where is our dear perverted prefect?
I left him asleep in my bed,
Sirius says.
probably dreaming of Blackbeard plundering his.
All right.
James interrupts loudly.
spellwork of the seas.
Lily asks, giving Sirius what James can only describe as a thoughtful once-over.
Yeah, he got it for his birthday. He's obsessed.
She laughs.
I've read it.
She leans in toward him.
Blackbeard looks a bit like you know.
Padfoot's eyebrows shoot up and he grins, suddenly smug.
Does he?
You're just missing the beard, really, and the tattoos.
I could grow a beard.
Sirius says thoughtfully. He cannot. James knows this for a fact. They both tried. The results were tragic. He's about to remind him of that, but he's interrupted by Mum's owl, Persephone, who has a gigantic package and is in quite a foul mood about it.
Presents.
James shouts, because sometimes he's 5 years old, even now at 17. Persephone bites him, which he doesn't appreciate. A man deserves some respect on his birthday. She steals bacon from Sirius, which he does appreciate. Remus wanders in as James is oohing and eyeing at the wrapping paper, which has dancing nifflers on it. Mooney's late for his own standards, hair still sleep mussed. He looks deeply unhappy, which is not the tone James wants set at the start of his birthday.
Was I imagining you in our room this morning?
He asks Lily as Sirius skitters over to make space for him.
No,
Lily says,
I needed to speak to Sirius.
Remus worries his lip in between his teeth.
Lily, a man's bed is a sacred place.
I wasn't being creepy, I just woke him up and ducked out.
She sounds a little hesitant.
Although, does Sirius always sleep so?
Naked.
Sirius finishes for her.
Sometimes Evans, when I'm a very good boy.
Remus goes pale.
Oh, fuck.
Sirius breathes out. Realization washes over James in the most uncomfortable, unhappy birthday way. Remus has this cream he slathers on his head, hands, and arms every morning for a week after the moon. It makes his scars fade down into silvery, thin things that James only really notices in the summers when his skin is sun-kissed and tanned. It's incredibly expensive. The bottle has to last him a whole year. He doesn't like to waste it on the parts of him no one other than the people who know his secret ever see. People like, for example, Lily Evans.
No.
James says as he jumps to his feet.
No, we are not doing this today. Tomorrow, August 19th. Bloody never. Any other day. We're not having a repeat of Padfoot's birthday.
He points at Remus.
You are going to stay calm.
He pivots to Lily.
You are going to think of any number of perfectly reasonable explanations for anything you did or didn't see.
He levels a glare at Padfoot.
And you. Shagging was one of the things I explicitly forbade on my birthday.
It was before midnight.
Sirius says, voice light, but he's all hard eyes and stiff posture, studying Lily carefully.
The only thing I saw
She tells them.
was Sirius Black's arse.
James has been watching Lily for years, and maybe it's creepy, but he knows what she looks like when she's telling the truth. Lily Evans is lying. She corners him later, when he's alone in the common room, flipping through one of the new issues of Marvin Miggs his parents sent along in his birthday box. They, it seems, also know he's secretly 5 years old.
James.
She says, and his stomach flip-flops. He should have gone with Padfoot and Mooney to McGonagall for disaster triage, or stopped Peter from going to his Sunday herbology study group. He can't face Lily alone.
Lily,
He says.
have you brought me a birthday tribute?
No.
She crosses her arms over her chest. They both look at each other in silence for too long. Lily breaks first.
I wasn't telling the truth at breakfast.
I know.
He looks back down at his comic. Anywhere but at her face is preferable right now. She's all open honesty, and now it's his turn to tell her a lie.
It's not any of my business.
She says. She sounds like she's holding back tears, so he looks back up at her.
I know it isn't, and I'm sure Remus would hate me for asking, but I can't stop wondering, did his parents do that to him?
James would laugh if he didn't find himself struck completely speechless at the idea of it. Hope and Lyle abusing Remus. They never would. The worst hurt Lyle's ever done to Remus is finding Sirius objectionable.
No.
He finally says. He pauses again.
And before you get any other wild ideas, Sirius didn't either.
I wouldn't think that. Sirius wouldn't.
She still looks teary-eyed. Her face is pinched. James wants to hug her. He remembers that feeling. It sat like a rock in his stomach the whole summer after first year when he was piecing everything together with Sirius and Peter. It's a shocking, unbalancing thing. He thinks she'll get to werewolf on her own eventually. He's not going to help her get there quicker, other than to defend the people who love Remus. He can, however, give her a hug. So he does. He stands up and puts his arms around Lily Evans for the first time in his life. She hides her face against his shoulder. James squeezes her.
I broke up with Kingsley.
She says into his shirt.
I heard. Everyone heard. You were very loud.
He rubs circles on her back, the way he used to try and soothe Sirius when he used to cry on James.
I broke up with Kingsley because of you.
His hand stops. His heart stops.
What?
He asks faintly. She pulls back from him and looks up at him. There's tear tracks on her face. She looks almost angry, though whether it's at him or herself, he doesn't know.
I went into your room because I wanted to speak to Sirius alone this morning about, well, you. Asking you. To Hogsmeade. And if you take me seriously. If I did.
James's eyes are the size of saucers behind his glasses.
What?
Finite. Thanks for listening to this text-to-speech podfic composed by Burning Aurora, Caliana, and Flowerhawk.